All right. Hello, everybody. And I remembered to unmute. How cool is that? My name is Alejandro Rojas, and you are watching UFOs Seriously from openminds.tv. And what we do at Open Minds is we provide you with credible UFO news and information. And our show that we do every Thursday at 6 p.m. that you're watching now. Essentially what we do is we go over the news, some of the stories that I've written on UFOs, and some of the videos that we've done. I also write about space and science, so I'll at least kind of give you an overview of those. Those are interesting and fun. But we have a lot of cool stuff. There's some interesting news. There was some action, some emotion, some craziness that went on this week. People talking about all kinds of stuff, so this will be a lot of fun. Also, I do want to say hi to people in the chat. Norberto, MP Luke, Dirk Bone Steel, and ZZ Doc Holiday. Some cool dudes. Hello, everybody in the room. And then I also want to... Well, let's go over here to my Patreon. Why, do you ask? You're like, oh, man, he's got Patreon. He's going to ask me for money. Well... if you go to Patreon, you can. It is a way for you to help keep me on the air and give me some money, as a little bit of as little as $1. But that's okay. You don't got to do that. You can also below this video, you'll see there's links to T-shirts. Get a T-shirt or something if you want to help out. That would be helpful because we give you a ton of information without charging anybody a dime, and because we like to get out all this credible UFO information. It's really important. That's what I am passionate about. But the big reason I'm bringing you over to my Patreon actually is because I post everything that I do here. And so we always start the show off here so I can show you what's going on, what we got going on out there. And then we'll go to the website. This is actually, we could take a look at it real quick. Openminds.tv. You may recognize him, the famous George Knapp, a Las Vegas investigator who... we'll talk about more about him actually, but this is our website, and if you go to our website, you can also get to my Patreon here, and we'll go there and talk some more because I've got UFO news there, and that's a big deal. That's something that we'll talk a lot about. But I haven't had this Patreon that long, and I've got 13 patrons. I created it essentially about the same time I started UFO Seriously Live. Thank you so much to my patrons, and I want to thank some of my new patrons, Stuart, Leela, and Gary. Thank you so much. Also, I want to say congratulations. I'm going to come back to the camera. Congratulations to Joseph, because he is a Patreon subscriber, and I, because I'm a journalist and I do some writing, and often I get to do some press stuff with cool people like National Geographic, and they'll give me cool stuff. And I got this water canister thing. It's like crystal with rocks in it and stuff for One Strange Rock, which was a television show, of course, that they were doing. They send us these care packages. Ooh, I've got one right here. I'm going to show you. This is cool. I've done a lot of stuff with the TV show Mars. And so they sent me this box, and it's a really cool box. I'll show you the cover here. Oh, this all of a sudden is turning into an unboxing video. But see, there's 100% Martian. Actually, I got a T-shirt that says that too, that I wear sometimes, that I got at Comic-Con, at their Comic-Con party. But pretty cool. So they gave me some National Geographic socks, Mars socks, and there's Mars on them. Some T-shirts. And essentially, Mars is a television show. If you haven't seen it, very awesome show. And they're going to do the second season of it. It's half documentary, half live action. And they talk about, what it's going to be like when we go to Mars. The documentary part has people like Elon Musk and other important people talking about the science and what they're going to do and how we're going to do it. And the drama part, of course, is kind of the drama of what's happening. And I think it's great because we're getting closer than people may think. Elon Musk and SpaceX want to go to Mars within 10 years. So this show talks about a lot of the things we need to consider if we're going to go to Mars. In fact, I got to do a talk for National Geographic at Comic-Con where I discussed that very topic. But in this is kind of interesting. They have two groups on Mars. These are the people that were in the first season. IMSF, it's kind of a international governmental organization, which might be the way we would go to Mars first. That's, for instance, if Boeing gets there first and NASA goes and partners with other countries. But the other one's Lucrum, and these guys represent, they'll be introduced in the second season, a mining company, that goes up there to mine Mars and everything. There's also a board game here, and I think what I'm going to do, and a keychain. So I'm going to give some of this stuff away too, not the t-shirts because I love my t-shirts, but yeah, so some of you that watch the show, of course, I do Patreons. They get priority for giveaways, but I'll be doing more giveaways too for you viewers. So some of that cool stuff that they give me. So check out the Mars TV show. It is very, very cool. Honesty is very important to me. So if it wasn't good, I would tell you, and hopefully you get the gist of that, as we go over news. Even people I know and am friends with, I may go, before I say it, or, you can tell that I'm uncomfortable because I'm about to criticize what they're doing a bit. But, I want to be credible with you all and give you all the skinny. All right, let's get to the chat real quick. Hey, I saw a UFO in the daylight and it cloaks itself, somebody said. Mark Richardson said. That's really interesting. Let's see. Other people, I love the box. You mean when we go back to Mars? Luke thinks we've been to Mars before. I don't think we've been to Mars before, but if you think otherwise, that would be interesting to hear. But you could be also making a joke. And if you are, that's kind of funny, actually. So, but let's go back to the browser. There's my live stream where I was looking at the chat. So let's go back to Patreon. Like I said, how did I even get off on that tangent? Oh, I was saying congratulations to Joseph because he won that other giveaway, and I haven't mailed it out. He was on vacation. How nice is that? And he just got back, so he said, send it away. Yay, and he was very happy. This is a really cool story. So a lot of what we've been talking about in the last few weeks has been To the Stars Academy, which is this organization started by Tom DeLonge. Surprisingly, why surprisingly? Because he's a rock star, and the other members of this organization are former intelligence and government and stuff like that, including a gentleman named Lou Elizondo, who we've recently found out, ran a secret government UFO project. So that's why they're so important. But this guy has said, and I do know these people, and so you'll hear me go, when I talk about them because I get nervous about, well, you never want to criticize your buddies, but we all need constructive criticism. Even myself, I get it. Lord knows, a lot of unconstructive criticism too, but I don't pay attention to that stuff as much. But this is a gentleman named Chris Cogswell who wrote this story for Open Minds. We just posted it today, and it's a really, really good story. So To the Stars is examining, they started this thing called the Atom Project, where they're looking into alleged anomalous material. And in fact, the way this story starts is, in the recent world of fringe science, there has been an explosion of interest in so-called metamaterials allegedly recovered from unidentified phenomena. And that was in this December New York Times story that broke this news about this Pentagon, secret UFO project, and Lou Elizondo was involved with and everything, and Harry Reid, he got the funding for it. So this is that story, that famous story that's got all of us in the UFO world in a tizzy here. But they say they recovered some materials. But their articles that they've written about these materials, or the information, they haven't given us much information. And honestly, the information they've given us about how they're going to examine it has been a little bit of lacking. They're essentially giving us tidbits, but we need more. And Chris Cogswell, who's got a PhD in like chemical engineering, and he works on nanomaterials and stuff, and he's been frustrated. He's like, we need to know more. We need to know more. And his thing is that in order to prove something is extraterrestrial or truly anomalous, it takes a lot of steps, and he wants them to say, he wants them to address all of these steps that it takes. And so what he has done here is outlined what it takes. If you're going to prove something to science, then this is what you need to do, this is where the conversation needs to go. I'm sure To the Stars is having this conversation behind closed doors, but, we need to talk about it in the public, and hopefully we can get in a conversation with some of those guys to be able to talk about where they are on this metrics that kind of Chris Cogswell has outlined, which is very general and is also universal. So hopefully we'll get some feedback soon to hear what their thoughts are on what Chris talks about here. But Chris gets very technical. The beginning part is the least technical. And what he essentially says is there's 3 things that need to happen in order for us to know something is anomalous and possibly created from an extraterrestrial civilization. This image here, by the way, is an artist concept of Kepler 186f, which was the first Earth-sized planet in a habitable zone that was discovered by the Kepler telescope. So it is in the distance. The Goldilocks zone means it's far enough from the sun where it's not getting too hot, but it's close enough that water exists in a liquid form, as you can see here with the oceans. And at least as far as we know, that's what we need in order to have life. As far as life as we know it, that's what you need for life to be abundant. So this planet may be teeming with life, and it may have extraterrestrial civilizations there. Well, if they're visiting us and something of theirs crashed and we've got a piece of material which To the Stars is alluding to, then first they'll need to prove that it's from space. Chris goes in detail about the actual tests you will need to use. In fact, this is a mass spectrometry machine, which is he refers to. This is at the University of Toronto. So these complicated machines that we'll need. This is another type of X-ray diffraction, another type of testing that will need to be done. And Chris describes it here. If you're good with physics and science, you'll know more. A lot of this gets over my head, to be honest, but you get the gist. But if we prove something is from space, we've got to be careful. That's not enough. Of course, a meteorite is from space. What if somebody took a meteorite and built something with it? That would indicate it's from space. It would be an engineered thing, but it doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial. And that's the second thing that we would need. Chris says we would need to prove that the material was engineered, that it was actually manufactured. So it's material from space and it's manufactured. That would demonstrate, something that was made in space. But the third thing that's going to be really important is it's also going to have to show an advanced technology that we're not aware of. It's going to have to demonstrate something that we can't do here or is abnormal to here. And he explains what he means by that. And to talk about how technical he gets, you can see this last sentence. When it comes to that third part, he says, are there super heavy elements which we have yet to discover here on Earth? Does it show crystal structures or solid phases that have not been documented by the material science community? Does it show composition and engineering, which is beyond the scope of science today? Those are some of the things that we're going to be looking for. And so that's kind of the bar. It's a very, very high bar that is set to prove that something is truly anomalous. And To the Stars is giving kind of overtures that it seems as though they have material they believe may fit this criteria. So, hope at some point when they feel like they have enough of evidence to say, and stand behind it and say, look, this is really anomalous. They're going to have to answer all of these questions. And the rest of this article really gets down to the science of the type of testing that will need to be done, and the type of the indicators and what we would be looking for to prove these 3 different points. So it's a really great article. Here's a picture of Chris right here. If some of you do other paranormal podcasts, you may be familiar with Chris. He is the host of the Mad Scientist podcast. So, in fact, he sent me some stickers not too long ago. So, check it. There's his stickers. Definitely his show logo is about very Halloweenish. So, this is the season for his podcast, I guess. So, yeah. Great article. I really love this article. I've kind of shopped it around. I've sent it to some of the To the Stars guys. We'll see what we get. I've gotten some response from some people who are very excited about it. And essentially everybody feels, it's time. This is a conversation that we need to have right now. If there are these alleged materials, we, as a community, need to understand where the bar is that we need to meet, and we're going to need, be educated on what steps are going to need to be taken to verify this material. Because as time goes on, and as we see if they're able to meet this bar, it could be very, very exciting. And these are the right people. They're credible enough. They've got the right connections to be taken very seriously. So if someone like me, for instance, if I felt as though, or even Chris, I think, although he works with universities, so he would have a easier time. But if, let's say, I felt I was able to demonstrate something was anomalous and I could meet all that criteria, I would still have to go to people who are plugged into the mainstream, to science, to be able to get them to champion my effort and to get this out to the people, to the right people, so it could be verified. And I really don't have as much access. These guys have tons of access because, they've worked at the White House, they've worked at the Pentagon. So it's very exciting, and all indications are, I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there about these guys. All indications are, by me, who I've actually talked to many of these people, in some cases, because they've been involved with investigations for many years. I've talked to some of these people many years ago, and they've been, kind of in the background, kind of keeping an eye on things or doing their own research secretly, because they don't want their credibility to be hurt. They've only recently been more bold in coming out. And I know these, at least, unless they're fooling me, which I doubt, they seem to be just like other UFO researchers who are very passionate about getting to the answers. And so I think these guys are the real deal, and they're doing their best. People have some criticisms for how they're doing what they do, and some of those criticisms I think are valid, but they're doing their best, just like the rest of us, to figure this all out. So really exciting time. So given that story, let's see what people are saying. Martin Willis, Podcast UFO. Hello, hi, good evening. Oh, Martin Willis is in. Chris said he was done with UFOs on Facebook 2 days ago. Chris who? Chris who, Martin? He'll answer me in just a second. But Martin Willis, who's in the chat, is actually a friend. He's on my podcast, Open Mind UFO Radio, and he does news at the beginning, and then I do the news on his show, Podcast UFO. Oh, they're saying Chris Cogswell, who I was just talking about, is done with UFOs. He has said that a few times because he gets very frustrated, but he's not done with UFOs. He was involved with the Mutual UFO Network. He may be done with them because he's not part of their organization anymore. But hello, Renee. Hello, Tim. Some of you other guys have joined the chat. Oh, Steve Padilla actually gave me $2 in the super chat. It hasn't popped up yet. Thank you, Steve. That's great. Steve sometimes criticizes me, which I don't mind because I think he's great. He is very courteous when he does it. And by the way, Steve's name should pop up right here. So just for those of you who haven't been here before, this shows the most recent subscriber, supposed to, Patrick, and it's probably right. And then up here, when people donate, either via the tip link in the chat or from the super chat, which is also in the chat, where you can then, those are supposed to pop up there. This is a stream element, which is something they use a lot with Twitch, and usually it works. And I love it because right here, something cool, we get this cool little video that pops up right there when someone subscribes during the show, of which usually someone does subscribe during the show. By the way, we are up to over 40,000 subscribers at Open Minds TV YouTube page, so very excited about that. Thank you, guys. Yes, Martin, you're right. I was talking about Chris Cogswell. And, of course, Martin is probably not aware that I just posted this story today, which is a UFO story. So he obviously, Mr. Cogswell, is not done with UFOs. He is a very bright guy. So, yeah, he's not done. Proof is right here at openminds.tv. There's his name. And there is his cute little picture. I think look at him there. He's like in a university classroom teaching something or something. And, he's got a PhD and 2 bachelors. So that guy's done a lot of school. So let's go back to Patreon. So thank you so much, Chris, for this story. I think this story is going to be a really good jumping point for conversations going forward as to what it takes to prove something is anomalous. Space tourism. Oh, this is cool. So let's see. When did I write this? So I also write for Den of Geek. And this was October 12th, so this was after the last show. I did talk about this a little bit, and I'll be doing a video on my other YouTube channel, The Alejandro Advantage, where I put my non-UFO stuff. And a shorter version of this story was in the last Den of Geek magazine that they handed out at New York Comic-Con. They create a print magazine for every Comic-Con they're involved with. So they had one for San Diego Comic-Con. In the next one, I'm going to have a large print article also, and that's going to be about To the Stars and Hunt for the Skinwalker and all of this cool stuff. It was supposed to be in this edition, but it didn't get in there. There wasn't room, and they have all this artwork for it and stuff, which is exciting. But they did get in my shorter piece on space tourism, and then I have this longer piece for the web. And essentially, this is, how can you get into space? We are on the cusp. We really are on the cusp of the beginning of true space tourism, where it's more affordable to get into space. What do I mean by more affordable? It's only $200,000 instead of $200 million, because actually this company here, Space Adventures, they started sending people into space in 2001, but it was with millionaires. So you may remember the first millionaire to space was Dennis Tito. Space Adventures is a company that brokered this trip for him to ride on a Russian spacecraft to the International Space Station. He supposedly paid $20 million for that trip. Since then, there have been 6 other tourists, one person going twice. Between 2001 and 2009, they all paid $20 to $40 million. Russia then stopped doing this partnership with them, not because of any political thing or anything bad. It was just that actually that's when the United States decommissioned the space shuttle. So NASA started buying those extra seats, so they weren't able to send people. But Space Adventures in the future wants to start doing this again. So they might do it with Boeing actually here fairly soon. But I go over the other companies that you could possibly go to space with. SpaceX, of course, they said that they're going to take a Japanese billionaire to space sometime soon, who's going to take some artists with him. Virgin Galactic, which is kind of the company that got everybody excited about all of this, they say they're going to be ready by next year to take people to space, possibly by the end of the year, which is good. Or they might have their first test by the end of the year, which is good because they've already collected ticket prices from $200,000 to $250,000 from many people, including a bunch of stars and famous people. So they got to get up there. Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos' Amazon.com company, they're planning on actually selling trips to space. And then finally, Worldview Enterprises. And this is a cool one because they're actually having a big balloon. And they're going to be a lot less expensive. They're going to be more in the tens of thousands. Now, they're not going all the way technically to space, but they are going to go very, very high where essentially it's going to feel like it because you're still going to have this amazing view. And this is actually the trip that I would do if I was going to do it because they go to, see, here's your deposit is $7,500, $75,000 for the ticket. I can't afford that right now. Hopefully one day I will. I love this quote too. We've had family sign up and buy the whole capsule. You can take your parents and children. It's going to be the ultimate Facebook status update. The entire family in space. But essentially what they're going to do is have this comfortable pod where they're going to serve you drinks and everything. And it's like a 3-hour trip where this balloon slowly takes you up. You get up to 100,000 feet where it looks like you're in space, and then they drop you, and a parachute brings you back down, but it's supposed to be a very comfortable ride. Currently, Worldview Enterprises is doing this. They're taking payloads up to these great distances with these balloons, but they're doing it for science experiments and things. So it's not something anybody can ride in yet, but soon they'll be selling those trips. So you could read more about that on Den of Geek. And like I said, I'm going to have a video on that soon. And then also, Micah Hanks. So my last Open Minds UFO radio was with Micah Hanks. He's really great. So this picture, I talked about this before, but this picture is from the Devil's Tower UFO Rendezvous, where I was a speaker just a few weeks ago. Micah was also a speaker. And I videotaped Micah and some of the other speakers, and we talked about Close Encounters, the movie, which pretty much made Devil's Tower famous, which is, you can see it in the background. It's actually humongous, but you can kind of get the idea of how, it just towers over the horizon there. Very, very cool structure. And I have more pictures at my Facebook. But I interviewed Micah and some others there where we talked about Close Encounters, the movie, and we also talked about this new world, what they think, what is it like for a UFO researcher now that this Pentagon announcement has come out. But I also interviewed him for our podcast where we talked a lot about this and the future and kind of how UFOs impact the future. He's a very intelligent person, very thoughtful, very well-spoken. Micah's great. And so he was on the last Open Minds UFO podcast. And then this is another story I posted recently. So some of you will remember a couple weeks ago, George Knapp was my guest on my podcast. And that's good because George Knapp typically doesn't do a lot of interviews where he's the interviewee because he's too busy interviewing people. He's an award-winning journalist for KLAS. He's won a couple Peabodys. He's won several Emmys. He's just won a ton of different awards. It's amazing. And if you've seen his work, you'll know why, because he's excellent, and he's very open and into the UFO topic and the paranormal topic. And in fact, the Hunt for the Skinwalker, which is described as the largest scientific investigation of the paranormal, which it was, he is the one who wrote the book with the lead scientist of that investigation, Colm Kelleher. Well, what we didn't know at the time is he actually wanted it to be a documentary, not a book, but they told him, nope, you can't do anything. So he had to wait for a while. They finally let him write the book. And then now recently they've allowed the documentary to come out. Jeremy Corbell is the filmmaker who put together the documentary. However, the majority of the documentary is footage and essentially material that George Knapp had put together. So it's kind of a documentary inside a documentary. But the interview that I had with George Knapp was so important, I felt, that I got a transcript created and I posted the transcript. And I think he says some really important things. And there's already been people out there writing about this interview, and they've got their own articles, and they're referencing some of the things George Knapp said here. So he talked about this DIA agent, for instance, that really is the impetus for the government program, because he went to Skinwalker, he had a paranormal experience, and then he went back to Washington, found Harry Reid, and said, dude, we have got to do a government investigation of this place because it's like paranormal and it's crazy. And Harry Reid said, you know what? I know the guy doing the investigations, and you're exactly right because he's told me about it. And so that's essentially how the investigation started. That information right there, I don't think has ever been shared anywhere. It's not even in the documentary. So information like that is what he shared with me. And you can have the transcript here. Transcripts are helpful so you don't have to go looking through the video for the quotes. Plus, you can just cut and paste the quotes here. Hopefully, you'll link to the story when you do that. But and this is a great picture provided by Jeremy Corbell from the documentary of George Knapp there at his desk. His desk is an absolute disaster. It looks a lot like my desk typically does. Many of you are probably at a desk that is a total mess like that as well. Devil Sour Outtakes. If you want an early sneak preview of this video of some of us being goofy as we were filming those interviews, then you can subscribe to or become a patron and you'll be able to see it. However, full disclosure, well, I don't have to tell you full disclosure. Anyway, you may have an opportunity to see it in the future. But, yeah, so there's the latest on the Patreon. Let's go back to the chat. All right, what are you guys talking about? Let's see. Any questions or anything? Can you use Amazon Prime to get a ticket? Martin Willis is asking. Martin, you know very well that that is not the case. Goofball. Martin has every right to be a goofball on my show because I am a total goofball on his show, although I'm a goofball on my show as well. And let's see, was he the one that said he saw an explorer on an engine? I'm just looking for any questions. I want to answer any questions. Someone says, any comment about Robert Dean passing? Oh, Stephen Padilla, who we were talking about earlier. He did pass away on October 11th, the morning. Robert Dean, he actually lived here in Arizona, so I got to meet with him and talk with him I shouldn't say many times, but over the years, a few times, and, kind of travel in the same circles. But he was actually very much a hermit. I mean, I have many of the mutual friends, and rarely was he able to be seen. In fact, this is interesting, and I knew this would be the case. I didn't go, but he had a birthday party a year or two ago. He didn't even show up. So everybody gathered at this birthday party. He didn't even show. And he's been, he just has not had much of a vigor for life in his final years, which is sad. But, yeah, unfortunately, Robert Dean has passed away. And that information is factual. A year or so ago, there were rumors out there that he had passed away, and it got out there, and people are like, oh my gosh, and it turned out it wasn't true. I guess when you get old, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen to Martin soon, because he's getting up there in age. Just kidding. No, he's not. He looks like he's much older than I am, and he doesn't even look like it. He looks about the same age as me. But once Martin and I do get up there, then they'll start saying this, because this happens to Stanton Friedman every once in a while too. In fact, it was probably maybe a year or so ago where someone said, hey, Stanton Friedman's passed away. And I got a hold of Stanton Friedman and said, hey, have you passed away? And he said, no, actually, I have not. I'm doing well. So yes, he subs for George Norrie. Is that right? George Knapp, Cleve, hello, Cleve, says George Knapp is one of the most credible guys in the field. I absolutely agree 100%. He is legit. And yes, he doesn't necessarily sub. He kind of subs, but he essentially, Sunday night's his. So, in fact, he really liked that Chris Cogswell story that I went over earlier, and he's going to talk about that a bit and at least post it on his news this Sunday. So that story about the science of anomalous material. So that's good. Yes, Jim Mars has also passed away, unfortunately. Do I have any Robert Dean stories? Well, I think one of the funny stories with him, and it's just, I don't know that we'll see this anymore, but as we transitioned, and I don't know, probably a lot of you guys are younger, but maybe some of you will remember this, and I remember it, I guess, in particular, because I was so close to different conferences and things that were going on. But in the 90s, especially late 90s, or I guess early 2000s, as things were transitioning to the internet, a lot of these older guys didn't have the internet or internet files. So I've even still got them. Bob Dean was doing a talk, and he didn't have a computer or anything, and he just, somebody put some pictures on a flash drive or something like that, and he gave them to me. He said, this is my presentation, and it was just some random pictures on a flash drive. So I put those on a computer and allowed him to use the computer so he could present his thing. And what was weird about this time before the internet is that a lot of people were getting photos, but whoever gave them to them misrepresented them. These days, and I knew because I could get on the internet at the time. In fact, I was a corporate trainer. I was training internet. And so they would show these images, and I would be like, no, that's not what that image is. And, they would be told they were spaceships or this or that. And they just weren't. So it was just kind of funny because he was one of those guys who was early on. And he was just, I would say he people give him this stuff. And, back then it wasn't like today where everybody's full of it, where most people are just completely full of it. It was, you trusted people more, I think. When people gave you something and said, oh, this comes from here or there, you're like, oh my goodness. And then he would share it and say, look, somebody gave me this, and this is a spaceship, or this is this. Now you can fact check on the internet and you can find out, that's not the case. So that's one of the things I remember about him. But otherwise, I remember, just unfortunately, he was very engaging, had a great voice. Everybody loved to hear him talk. He would often kind of get emotional, but he would get everybody emotional when he would do a presentation. So it always kind of felt like this moment. It was just him in a chair. And that's why, even though he didn't really do many talks, he really wasn't on a whole lot of television shows, he's very well known because anybody who saw him talk, I think, live kind of shared in this moment, and it was an important thing for them. So, yeah, so that's what I think interesting about Bob Dean. And yep, Renee says that Robert Dean and Dr. Roger Lear are in heaven looking at extraterrestrial alien UFOs in interstellar outer space. Hopefully, maybe when we pass, we get all the answers. Who knows? All right, so let's go to Open Minds. So, few stories circulating there. We've essentially talked about all of this. The only thing that we haven't talked about that you see an image coming around, this is that video where I talked about, where all of us researchers talked about the Pentagon UFO program. You could see that there, or on this YouTube page. And also, this is really good. Of course, I promoted this the last couple of weeks, but David Marler, an excellent researcher. He has a book on triangle UFOs. He's the expert on triangle UFOs, but he's also an expert on many other cases, one of those being the Battle of LA UFO incident from 1942, where something flew over Los Angeles. Here's a picture right there. Let's go. And it's unexplained. And David explains why this case is much more important than anybody really has talked about. I don't know anybody who's done a talk as thorough as David's that really, makes you think, holy moly, this case is just way more important than I thought. There was radar early on, but radar. There was so many witnesses. There are government documents. It's a really interesting case. I'm going to refresh this. See, we've got this thing where it takes a little while for our updates to show up here. So these are the old headlines. So how do I get to the new headlines? Well, I have tweeted them, and I have also put them on Facebook. And when I send out those links, those do work. So let's see. Let's go to my Open Minds Twitter. There it is. UFO headlines, the headlines, because we've got some great headlines, and this is going to bring up some more news. In fact, I'm surprised nobody's asked about it. I'm going to go back in the chat here and see if anybody has asked about it, because there's really big news that talked a lot. Thank you. Do you think that To the Stars can get a press conference with the Congress again? Like in 2013. We're going to talk about that. So Cleve Parr is asking, do you think you and To the Stars can get a press conference with Congress again? Actually, it's better. We're going to talk about something really soon here that's even better than that. But I wanted to see if there are any other questions. Something that we're going to talk about. We've talked about before, but more came out this week, and we'll be talking about it more. So let's get back to the news. So here's the news in the last week. Let's first look at this one, and this answers that question that someone in the chat was just talking about. So this is a story by Nick Pope. Nick Pope used to work at the Ministry of Defense investigating UFOs in Britain. They actually had a UFO program that spanned from the 70s to 2008. We've got some articles at Open Minds on this program, and so does Nick Pope at his website. Really good information. It's very interesting that the UK investigated UFOs for that long period of time, and likely, even Nick Pope says, likely still investigating, just not in a publicly accessible forum like he used to work for. But this is great. This is in The Guardian, which is one of the most respected national newspapers in the UK. Now, Nick is going to be actually, and this is rare, he doesn't do podcasts in the UFO field that much, but he's going to be my next guest on the Open Minds UFO radio. So check that out on Monday and Tuesday. Tuesday I'll have that out. But Nick Pope, obviously he's an important person because he investigated UFOs for the British government. And this is a great article that he got in The Guardian. A lot of times he will print articles or do interviews in the UK tabloids. And if you've been on Twitter, I've kind of had a discussion with him online about it. And we'll do that again on the podcast because, as you've probably heard myself and Martin talk about, the tabloids are not the most credible sources of information, but he argues they're big in Britain. In fact, one of them, the Metro, he says is the biggest paper out there. So it's important, when you get in those. And I've been in them quite a bit. And in fact, I think her name is Emma Perry, is one writer that I've worked with that I really like. So there are some good people and some good stuff going on in those, but there's also some really hokey, terrible stuff going on in there. But that's not the case with The Guardian. The Guardian is a very respected paper. But look, check this out. So here's his article. UFO sightings may be falling, but Congress is still paying attention. Renewed U.S. interest could produce some fascinating hearings, but the focus should be on the quality, not just the quantity of reported sightings, which is a great argument. So what he's saying is, the number of sightings shouldn't really be as big of a deal to people. One, there are thousands of sightings still. Even though the sightings are down, there's still thousands of them a year, and the percentage that they've dropped is not really as big of a deal when it comes to the overall scene. The other thing is the sightings are not necessarily that great anyway. Remember that, and I think many of you will agree, especially if you've done UFO research or if you've been a investigator with the Mutual UFO Network. I was an official, field investigator for them for a long period of time. 90 to 95% of the UFO sightings are nothing anomalous. They're misidentifications or they turn out to be something mundane. So that's already an issue. The other issue is there's only a couple reporting places you can go to. The main two are New Fork, National UFO Reporting Center, and the other one's the Mutual UFO Network. National UFO Reporting Center has been around kind of for a long time, especially online. They were online way before MUFON was, even though MUFON's been around longer. So people knew about New Fork kind of because they were online, and it took MUFON so long to get online. MUFON, and what my point is, not many people even know that these companies exist. So they don't know where to report to. So only a fraction of people actually even know they can report these UFOs. So a lot of people estimate that, we're only getting, with MUFON or New Fork, maybe 10. I think that's even generous. 10% of the people who have a sighting will report it. In fact, this is great. Something for you all to discuss in the chat here, which is how many of you have had a sighting? How many of you have reported it? Often when I'm in a group, even at MUFON, I've asked this question in front of a large MUFON group, and so have others, and said, how many of you reported? And the majority of people say they've seen one, and the majority also say they didn't report it. So that's an example. So the numbers aren't as important as the really good cases, and that's one of the big arguments that he's making here. But this is interesting news here, which has not been, widely distributed. He's saying that the House Armed Services Committee has taken an interest in UFOs, and apparently they have been briefed by he says by the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which of course is that formerly secret, program that Elizondo used to work for. Also, we do know that, and he says this here, data from 2 civilian UFO, I know he's talking about actually the reporting there, but he's talking about how there have been other presentations. Some of you may have remembered that we had Chase Kletsky on. She's the director of investigations for the Mutual UFO Network. She was on just a few weeks ago, and she was saying she's going to be also talking to them about UFOs. So we have had the Armed Services Committee bringing in UFO researchers and organizations to talk about UFOs. That is fascinating. And what are they talking about? That's where Nick Pope starts to say, well, they might be talking about numbers of sightings, but that's not as important as looking at the really important cases. And that's where he really kind of comes through. He gives a little bit of history about more of the credible information about out there. He talks a lot about To the Stars Academy and ATIP, that Pentagon program. So it's a great article, just kind of like what you would want in a mainstream press. You would want a credible person relaying very credible information, which is exactly what he's doing. So it's a great article, and we'll be talking to Nick Pope more about this article on the next podcast. Really, really good stuff. In fact, Nick Pope, when we had Lou Elizondo at the International UFO Congress, Lou wasn't able to be there, which I'm kind of happy because it would have been a circus. It was right after this all happened. But he did do a video interview for us, and then I got on stage with Nick Pope, and we kind of reviewed it, especially Nick, because we got his insights, because really he's got some of the best insight into government investigation of UFOs because he actually did it. So another story. So Cheryl Costa, we talk about her almost every week because she writes a piece on the Syracuse New Times about UFOs every week. This week she is looking at something really interesting: UFOs that change shape. She first talks about how, because she's written a book on UFO sightings, especially given the Mutual UFO Network's data. And so she's usually talking about that lately because her book was very popular. In fact, she won a Researcher of the Year award at the UFO Congress last year because of her book getting such big attention. I mean, New York Times, everything, all over the place. There's so many stories on her book. And she said she didn't really pay attention to the changing or morphing UFO reports because she felt she got the impression that they were flawed observations. And other people kind of were under that assumption as well, she said. They figured, if someone says it's changing shape, that's kind of not very credible, so that must not be a very good report. So nobody really paid attention to him. But then she heard George Knapp on Coast to Coast AM interviewing Jacques Vallée. And Jacques Vallée made the point about changing UFOs that seemed to morph in an effort to confound observers, their cameras, and other scientific equipment that the researchers might be using. So she's saying that, researchers have seen this, videotaped it, and it's been observed, and that Jacques Vallée, who is a renowned UFO researcher, he took those sort of things seriously. So she actually decided to take a closer look at that data. I do want to say something about Jacques Vallée real quick if you're not familiar with him. Jacques Vallée was the protege of Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was an astronomer, a professor at Northwestern and other universities, who was hired by the Air Force to be their consultant when they investigated UFOs from 1947 to 1969. At the beginning, he thought UFOs were ridiculous, a joke, and then over time, with the data, he decided, wow, this is a true mystery. This is something that we need to take seriously. And then, pretty much every other, like Lou Elizondo or Nick Pope, they both said this. They went into these government programs total skeptics, kind of bummed, like, what the heck? Why? I'm joining the government to investigate or to look at cool stuff, and you're making me look at UFOs? This is stupid. But over time, they found out, wow, there are some really good cases. This is a really serious phenomena. So when Hynek left the Air Force, he started a UFO research organization, and he's kind of the grandfather of modern UFO research. And Vallée from France is his protege. In fact, the movie Close Encounters, the main character is French, and that was inspired by Jacques Vallée. So that's who he is. Very important person. In fact, France is the only really large kind of Western country still doing government UFO investigations under their space program. So it'd be as if NASA had their own UFO research organization. And Jacques Vallée was part of helping to get that started back in the 70s, and it still continues to this day. But here's some really interesting information, and I don't know exactly what to make of it, but it is really interesting. So what Cheryl did was kind of look at, she took kind of the most popular thing, type of UFO that's seen. In this case, a light in the sky. And she looked at, how often is that reported? And you see here that the sightings increased and increased and increased and then dropped down. And this is what people have been talking about lately because her findings have shown, there's not as many sighting reports. Now, I feel I understand why. And why do I say that? Well, because I was actually the PR guy for the Mutual UFO Network, whose data this is, for these years here. I left right here to come work at Open Minds, and then they got better. No, I'm just kidding. I left to come work at Open Minds, and I continued to watch this data and write stories about it and track it every year. And this was when MUFON got the television show Hangar 1. So Hangar 1 first season, Hangar 1 second season, Hangar 1 off the air. So I think it's just like what I talked about earlier. People didn't know. As time went on, people began to know more about MUFON once we finally got online, which was around this kind. We're taking online reports and we got better. Then we got a TV show. There was not only a spike in reports, there's also a spike in membership. And then the television show is gone. Awareness around MUFON has changed. So people just don't know they have this source to report UFOs. That's how I believe, because it fits that so closely. That's why I think that we have this pattern. But she matched that up against people reporting the changing UFOs, the morphing UFOs, and she saw there wasn't as drastic as a change. There's not as many reports between 0 and 200, but that there's a little bit of movement during these times, but there wasn't as much of a change. But that it's consistent. And I think that's her main point, is really that it's consistent. She took a closer look here. She's kind of saying what I'm saying here, that television shows, influence those numbers. But you can see here in particular that, this is the morphed UFOs or changing UFOs. And to her, she feels like that demonstrates that the phenomena of changing UFOs is legit, because and I think she's got a point, if they were mistakes, this would be more erratic. It wouldn't, as closely fit what we see with other reports. It would be all over the place. People don't make mistakes on a consistent basis. But because it's consistent with the other reports, that perhaps it's legit. So in the records, we can see that there is a phenomena of changing UFOs. I think that's really interesting. I think that this is an interesting story. So she often does really cool stuff like that. Can't see that little X. So that's what that is. Next. Now we get into more To the Stars. But before we do that, let's go to the chat. I need some kind of board here where I can go clink, clink, and switch. There's probably a way to do that. Let me try it. Hey, look. I can push this button and go back and forth. I'm going to do that from now on. Many of you are probably like, duh, you should have tried that weeks ago when you started the show. And you're probably right. So, what am I doing? I'm going to the chat to see if there are some questions. Alex, welcome to the chat. He says, why don't MUFON explain who they are for general public information to them educated? I'm not sure what you mean there. But the Mutual UFO Network, is a nonprofit organization. They've got chapters throughout the country. They have hundreds of investigators throughout the country. Their purpose is to share information for everybody. Certainly, there is certain information you can't get to unless you subscribe. Not that it's that expensive. And otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stay in business. What is it? Something like $50 a year. So that's less than maybe $5 a month or something. So that's who MUFON is, if you're not aware. Credible people, pops and caps. Pops and caps. Pop and caps, which is, very violent name there, buddy. But he says, credible people told me I was credible. Unfortunately, there's no place for credible people in ufology. Well, you know what? I would say for the most part, unfortunately, he's right. There's credible people have a harder time, I think, in this field. It's easier to make assumptions, and people get mad when you don't believe their assumptions. But it's harder, just like always. Scientific rigor is hard. And, there's more than just science involved with all of this. But, trying to stick to the data and follow the data is much harder than just saying, oh, they're all from Zeta Reticuli. I figured it out. I'm done. So, any Tom DeLonge updates? We're getting to Tom DeLonge, Dave Nezra. Actually, we're going to be talking about that next. So you came just in time. Dirk says, I think it's $30. Poppin' Cap says he loves me. I love you too, man. So let's see. Let's check it out. So no other questions. Let's get into this news, and I'm going to be able to push the button now. Oh, man. Push the button. It's not working now. I'm going to have to go. My camera's in the way, so I always have to look around my camera. But yeah, so let's check it out. So here's the latest. So George Knapp, I keep talking about George Knapp. Oh, George Knapp is so great. George Knapp is wonderful. Like some kind of fanboy, but I am a George Knapp fanboy. But let's check this out. He's written a story in the last week, and it's important. So we'll take a look at this. He wrote this with Matt Adams, but his question is, I-Team, what's happened since major announcement to end UFO secrecy? So he's kind of going through a year in review. Of course, it hasn't been a year, but he's talking about, how Tom DeLonge came out. And you know what? I don't think he's written a story like this. I've got one. In fact, it's right. I thought it was on the front here. But essentially, if you look up DeLonge, I've got a story about Tom DeLonge and everything. And that's what this is. He kind of is reviewing and telling people, well, here's how it all happened. Tom DeLonge, and this is true, and let's go over this. So this is where it happened first. Everybody talks about the New York Times in December releasing their story, and that's when everything got released. Actually, attorney, what? I don't know if you guys can hear that, but one of these videos just started up, and it was annoying. But here's where it happened. There's Lou Elizondo. That was the first time we saw or knew about Lou Elizondo. Nobody knew about him. Then all of a sudden, Tom DeLonge, he comes to UFO Congress. Actually, he makes a video for us. And he says, hey, guys, something's going to happen. Something big is going to happen. I'm working with all these important people. Just wait. It's going to happen in a few months. And we waited and we waited and we waited. That was in February. Nothing was happening. There's Tom DeLonge right there. He even was sending me emails occasionally. He called a couple times. He's like, oh, my gosh, it's going to happen. I'm sorry. It's getting delayed. Then he's like, call me. And he's like, it's happening. It's happening like in the next couple days. And this was in October, right before this press conference. We were able to, he took some input from me, which was really nice. I was very flattered. And I wasn't sure. Well, when I saw the video, I was like, OMG, this is amazing. Because in October, he then, October 11th, interesting. And exactly a year before Robert Dean died. I wonder if anybody's put that together. Passing of Robert Dean was a year after they made this announcement. So October 11th comes around and they do this press conference. And Tom DeLonge's like, I'm starting the To the Stars Academy where we're going to investigate UFOs and we're going to look at UFOs, figure out their technology, build spacecraft, and we're going to fund it by entertainment and all of this stuff. And here's the guys I'm working with. This is Steve, I think it's Justin. I'm going to get the names wrong, but essentially I remember their titles. So he worked for intelligence at the White House during the, I think it was the Clinton and the Bush era. So he was a intelligence advisor. He's like a deputy assistant. You can see all this at To the Stars, but they're very high level. This is a career CIA guy. Just came out in October as well. Here's Hal Puthoff, a scientist who's worked for Bigelow for many years, but he's also worked for all of the major contractors, defense contractors out there, essentially the government. He's worked for a ton of different corporations and companies. This guy worked for Lockheed Skunk Works. Essentially, this is the company that built Area 51. And then this guy, Lou Elizondo, and he says, in October, I used to work at the Pentagon. I worked for the Department of Defense and Intelligence, and I worked on a project investigating UFOs. And, a lot of us are like, what? What did he just say? What is he talking about? But this news came out that they started this whole conference Lou Elizondo made his statements. You can see him doing it right here, and they also had a supplemental video that they showed. So it was like, holy crap, this was like big to me. Some people were still kind of like, oh, this is stupid, no big deal. But, you know, I did an interview with Leslie Kane soon after this happened because she worked in coordination with them as well and wrote a piece in the Huffington Post that went up the same day to help promote the creation of this program. And her and I were like, why is nobody talking about this Lou Elizondo character who says he worked for the Pentagon investigating UFOs? We UFO researchers, even though we've received documents, in some cases, people like Jaron Greenwald of the Black Vault has done all this FOIA work to get thousands of documents to show the government has been investigating UFOs in some instances since 1969, but they keep telling us that no, you know, it's gaslighting, essentially. They send us the documents. We get the documents that show, here's a UFO report that was escalated to, you know, the highest echelons of the government, and still told, oh, no, we don't care about UFOs. What? And then this guy comes out and says, yeah, sure, I've been investigating UFOs for the government for years. But that's kind of how it happened. So he also then goes over, he goes over that short little history here with some links to his stories, George Knapp and the I-Team stories about the group. And really, George Knapp has been the best resource for the latest breaking information really regarding all of this, because Lou, since he left the program, has not had the ability to release information about the program because, of course, he is under, he's signed non-disclosures, or he's got his secret clearances. Whereas George Knapp has been able to even go to Washington and get some other documents released. Examples of that being a military report on the Nimitz sighting in 2004, which he was talking about here during this. I can't believe I can't remember the names. I should just look up To the Stars and get the names. Let's do that. To the Stars. And here's where you guys can find out more about all of these guys. If you just go to the Stars, the team, there's Tom, there's Jim Semivan, the CIA, career CIA intelligence guy that I was talking about. I got to talk to him. He's actually had his own experiences. That's why he's interested. He did tell me because of course I asked, he had no indications and he was curious. He never ran across any official UFO information during his career, and he looked because he was very interested because he had his own experience. That's why once he retired, he wanted to join this group. Dr. Hal Puthoff, who I mentioned before. Here he is, Steve Justice. He was the Aerospace Division Director, the guy sitting in the chair who worked for Skunk Works, they're the group that in charge of Area 51. I was getting his name mixed up. There's Lou with Chris Mellon. That's the name I couldn't think of. Chris Mellon, I mean, read this. He served 20 years in the federal government, including as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in the Clinton and Bush administrations. So there's a lot more other people here. Colm Kelleher, he's the guy who wrote the book with George Knapp, who worked with Bigelow, investigating the Skinwalker Ranch and doing paranormal investigations all the way back in the 90s. So he's been in this for a long time. So, but yeah, you can check that out here, but we got other stories to move to. So that's a new story from George Knapp that everybody could check out. Let's see. Hey, let's go to the chat. Let's see. Popping Caps is happy that I love him too. Moses had to go. Bye, Moses. And Dirk says it's getting weird in here. Was it getting weird in there? Moses. Oh, yeah, Moses came in. I was talking about Jesus and stuff, so, which makes sense. He's Moses. Why is Tommy saying there is a threat when there's not? And where is the more credible evidence like materials and videos coming out? So let's see. Let's start. Why is Tom saying there's a threat when there's not? I don't know that we can say there isn't a threat. And in a way, there is a threat. Lou Elizondo talks about this. Why is it the aerospace, advanced aerospace threat identification program? All of these programs are under the guise of threats. Here's why. If it's an unknown technology in our airspace, then we have to assume it's a threat until we find out otherwise. So that's the point and why he's saying it's a threat. Although Tom DeLonge also is more of he believes kind of a lot of fringe ideas when it comes to UFOs. In fact, prior to the October event, he was really sharing a lot, and he does feel that, we're being visited by malicious things, and so he doesn't have a positive perspective on what he believes is coming here. But you'll notice he hasn't really talked since October with the press or anything, because he discovered that, he was kind of just speculating and throwing stuff out there that is really weird, and it kind of undermined the credibility of the organization. So he has not been speaking much lately, especially about that sort of thing. Let's see, what was the other question you have? Where is the more credible evidence like materials and videos coming out? Or when, I think you might be asking. That we don't know yet. So that's part of the conversation we talked about earlier, where they say they have these materials. They say they're researching them. It takes time to do the research. We don't know. We don't have insight into how much research they're going to do, nor do we know how long it's going to take them to do all of that. So people like Chris Cogswell wrote that story for Open Minds, where it kind of outlines the very many steps and the massive amount of work they have to do to prove something's anomalous. So that's going to take quite some time. They've only been doing this stuff for a couple months now, so it could be a while till we see something. But hopefully, there has been news that they are working on public releases, or at least programs or projects where they can release more information. So hopefully it'll be sooner than later, but as soon as I have more information, you'll know I share it with all of you guys. So we'll see. All right, let's get back to the news. Back to the news. Gonna go back to the news. I should be singing that Prince song, Controversy, because there's been some controversy. So, there was an overview of what the last year's story by George Knapp, but to give you an idea of who To the Stars is and everything, but here's some controversy that's happened recently. And actually, I feel really good, because I feel like we've been on top of this on my podcast and also on Martin's, where we've been a little more accurate. So here's a story in Billboard just, yesterday or a couple days ago. Tom DeLonge calls report on UFO research firm's $37 million deficit a blatant lie. So online, there's been a lot of news that, oh my gosh, Tom DeLonge, these guys are in debt, $37 million. What did they do with that $37 million? They're screwed. What's going to happen? Some people were saying, oh man, they built a UFO. They spent $37 million on it, all this money they got from people, and now they're not going to share everything. Oh my gosh, what a joke. This is terrible. And then somehow, and that's what we've been speaking to. And I'll get to what we were talking about in particular in just a second. But Ars Technica, which is a outlet out there, they kind of write about tech and everything. They came out with a story saying that essentially that, the same thing, that they're in debt, $37 million. What a joke. Tom DeLonge's screwing everything up. Here it is, published by Ars Technica. And this is essentially saying that is completely wrong. Well, Tom also posted something on his Facebook about it. Then he took that down because it was a little bit difficult to understand. And then they wrote an article just, what is this, yesterday? Yeah, today's the 18th, so 2 days ago. Can't even remember the day. This is what happens when you get old, people. Getting old. Me and Martin are getting up there. Teasing Martin because he's still in the chat, I think. But anyways, they tried to explain this is not debt. We are not in debt. What this was stockholders' equity deficit and based off of stock-based compensation. What does that mean? I still don't know. I still didn't understand what they were talking about here, actually, when they said this. But on my show, I was pointing out, and people, I don't know why people, in this same document, all you had to do was scroll down, and you could see, okay, they've got a budget. All of their budget is completely there. So where did this $37 million go? Well, if you looked, there was millions of dollars that went to stock-based compensation. And what they try to describe here is debt is not the same as a deficit. They're very, very different things when it comes to accounting. And my point was just this. I don't understand this stuff so much. I am not an accountant. I hate doing my own taxes, although I do them well, I think, but they're very simple, you know. Corporate taxes and stuff, not my cup of tea whatsoever. I would rather figure out well, anyway, getting to this, but at least I can understand stock-based compensation means that is just what it says. You're paying your employees in stock. The stock is worth X amount, but that X amount is an arbitrary number. If you all know about kind of valuations and valuating, I watch Shark Tank, so that's how I know about valuations and how you can, that's a moving target and that number's all over the place. So essentially what this means is that it's just on paper. It's not real money. It's just a accounting thing. So one of the very smart guys in the UFO field, and I put this in my headlines, even though this isn't a mainstream article either, but it's a great article to understand this. This researcher, Isaac Coy, he's a barrister, which is like a lawyer in the UK. They call them barristers. And this isn't his real name. In fact, he doesn't use his real name because he doesn't want to hurt his credibility because he's, you know, he's really into the UFO topic. He's more about, you know, records and stuff like that. And you can read more about him here on his blogs, UFO Inquiry Blogspot. He's a great service to this field. And he says here, hey guys, I have been critical of To the Stars and some of the way they do things in the past. However, this whole idea that they're $37 million in debt is completely unfair and misconceived reporting. And he does, I think, the best job I've seen thus far explaining it. It's kind of complicated. He goes through a scenario, you know, if you were a guy who had a company selling 1,000 copies of a book and your profit was $10,000 a year, and then somebody gave you some incredible technology and said, hey, sell this. This is part of your company now. Then you would have to come up with a value for that. You would have to come up with, which isn't a real value because you don't know what it's worth, but you've got to guess because when you put in your taxes, you have to, it's very complicated and everything. But the point was, and he's got, you know, some of the information here. The point was that you see all of that money, over $30 million is in this stock-based compensation. And one of the points that Tom DeLonge made also is that if you went, there was, and Isaac's got it here, there was a definition here that explained how that was not real money, that was for, you know, stock purposes. And this is, of course, a very complicated explanation, but Isaac breaks it down here because he's a lawyer. Now, Isaac's a lawyer. He understands this stuff. And I've actually talked to a couple other people who understand this stuff better. And it kind of gets back to this Chris Cogswell, chemical engineer, talking about the science before. Even though he's trying to translate the science, Chris, in that other article, and even though Isaac is trying to translate this legalese, this accounting kind of legalese here. It still goes over my head. I'm going to be honest here. So it's very difficult to understand. But really, a reporter could have done what I did and said, it looks like it's stock-based compensation, so it's not real money. They're not really $37 million in debt. But this has been a big story. I mean, this story went to Mashable. It went to, I don't know. It was all over the place. In fact, let's go look. Tom DeLonge. In fact, because they all blamed him, right? Here we go. Oh, no, this is reunion stuff. Let's do within the past week. You'll see these stories about their research company here, him responding to the report. So you've got Complex, Insider, The Daily Dot, Guitar.com, so lots of rock and roll places. But there were more. There was like, other outlets that were talking about this. So it became big news, all of this, and it was Ars Technica. Some of those other news outlets actually apologized for their mistake and made corrections. But unfortunately, as far as I know, and let's go take a look, Ars Technica, I don't think they did, at least last time I checked, which is really unfortunate because, it does say updated. So it looks like they did do an update. The original story mischaracterized To the Stars deficit as debt. The story has been changed to reflect a more accurate picture of the company's finances. So it looks like they did finally go fix that article as well. So, and admitted their mistake. So, Eric, you could have done a little more. He's a space editor. So he probably would know more about Chris's article regarding the science. He's probably just not an accountant person himself, so he kind of screwed that one up. Oh well. And you know what? And I gotta say, this happens a lot, and because I don't want to let Eric completely off the hook here, just because he's a science guy and he screwed up the accounting. A lot of people love to take pot shots at paranormal and UFO people. No matter how credible it is, it's always fun, especially for a lot of these science guys, to take a crack at somebody trying to do some serious UFO or paranormal research and kind of make fun of it so he can get some hits and stuff. And that's just how this article feels. I called it a sloppy article because it is a very sloppy article. The facts are just kind of all over. I don't think he accurately portrays very much in here, to be honest. So I wasn't impressed with the article, even without the financial stuff. So this goofball is just trying to take a crack at the UFO field. Jerk. And I'm sure his bosses weren't happy with his, change up there. So Tom DeLonge got the last laugh on that one. All right, let's see. Let's go to the chat. People talking about spelunking. I've done that actually in the past. Let's see. Aliens cannot invade Earth because they are incompatible with Gaia, so they would need to create hybrids. So invasion would be exploiting our material resources and our spiritual emanations. Very interesting. Let's see. That's an interesting speculation. I don't know where you get that information, but that's great. And you could tell us where you get that information. That would be helpful. And this is from, I'm not sure what his name was. Bobby Broadway says, David Jacobs. That's a good point. I think that is, that's not completely, but it is somewhat along the lines of what David Jacobs was a PhD, a historian. He's looked into this for a while. He's done regressions. I would argue that he and his partner, Bud Hopkins, didn't necessarily do the best regressions. And here's my issue with their regressions, is that they would have someone fill out an application first. And right there, I've got a degree in psychology. And I know right there, and I've got a certificate in hypnotherapy because I wanted to learn more about it. And you are tainting the data when you do that. You don't want to do that. You want someone to come in to, even with someone going to someone who does abduction work, you're already tainting the information. It's better to have them go to someone who is, unbiased, or at least their impression is they're going to share information, not any particular type of information, because the mind is very manipulable. I could, right now, any of you in this room, I could put you under hypnosis, and let me put it this way. Hypnosis is just relaxation. I call it advanced relaxation. You're just getting in a relaxed state. But I could walk you through a scenario, which is what hypnotherapy is, in your mind, where I elicit different visualizations, much like a dream state. When we dream every night, our mind does wild, wild stuff. And essentially, the mind is able to do that. So I'm not saying regression or hypnotherapy or is a waste. I'm just saying that you have to be very careful the way you do it in order for it to be better information. And you can't do a survey that says, answer these questions. Do you see aliens? Have you seen aliens throughout your life? Because right there, when you regress that person, they're going to see aliens. That's what's going to happen. That's the way the brain works, my friends. Let's see. Besides, E.T. would have to comply with HIPAA laws. Pops and Caps is saying. Pops and Caps is a funny fella. That is very funny. Oh, Doc Holliday, you must live in Vegas. You said you saw Bigelow buildings. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and the Bigelow building has a big alien on the side of it. You're right. Let's look at that, because that's cool. Let's see. I have an article where I've got that in there. In fact, what was that? Cute girls. In fact... Oh, let's do this one. I think it's in the Tom DeLonge. Let's just do Bigelow. Now, some of you probably already know this. This is a story about Bigelow, because Bigelow is a big deal when it comes to the space community. Man. Oh, let's just do the easy search. Sorry, I wanted to show you on my site. And actually, if you look at the Tom DeLonge story, I know it's in there, but let's do Bigelow alien building. I'll bet you that'll pull it up right there. Images. Alien dum-dum. I'm the dum-dum, by the way. There you go. So there's the building with the big alien on the side. Join the adventure. Bigelow Aerospace. Now, this was early on when they used to use kind of more of this when they had BASS. So BASS was Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Studies, the acronym BASS. So when they got the government funding to investigate the paranormal, he did this under his Bigelow Aerospace Company and created this division called BASS. And, they had the alien on the side because he's really into aliens. But these days, he's a little bit more shy about sharing information. He did an interview on 60 Minutes, but that was actually quite some time ago, and they aired it much later. These days, he's, I think, a little more uncomfortable, from what I understand, sharing his alien and UFO interests because he's got a partnership with Boeing, and he has a module on the ISS right now, and he's hoping to build these guys right here to put in lower Earth orbit. And this is a scale model of a large habitat where this is actually, a hallway where someone could walk through, and then the surrounding is storage or other space where you can do experiments and things in space. So essentially, he'll be using Boeing and or SpaceX to fly people up to these buildings that he's going to have here. Okay, I'm a bonehead. I didn't even show you the picture. Here's the picture. There's the aliens. I had it on me. Sorry, guys. So there's a picture. This is a large scale of one of his inflatable. And this is a funny story if you don't know it. So here's Bigelow. Oh my gosh, this guy. So this guy is a billionaire in Las Vegas. He had already been doing his paranormal investigations. Let's go look at him with his habitat here. He decides he wants to get into the space program. So he hears about this project that NASA had where they're building these inflatables because it's easier. You can pack these modules up, fit them in a rocket. When it gets up there, you inflate it, and so it's a great way to transport a large habitat, and it just takes up a small space during transportation. Well, he decides, hey, this sounds like a great project, and NASA was going to mothball it. So one of the guys in charge of the project was trying to get other investors to keep the project alive so NASA could keep working on it. Well, Bigelow goes to this meeting, and at this meeting, as you know, Martin Marietta, Boeing, all of these large corporations, and Robert Bigelow. They did their pitch. You guys need to give us millions and millions of dollars so we can keep this going. It's a viable project. It's a great idea. None of them decided to do it. It just wasn't the right time for them. So Bigelow said, I'll do it. And he essentially let it mothballed by NASA, and then he bought the project. And then that's when he went and bought the space and started building his buildings so they could build these large habitats. Now, years later, he's got 2 of these floating around in orbit right now. They're unmanned. They're just test habitats. He's got one attached to the International Space Station. Again, it's a test one, so they go in there. So I'm not sure if they're actually using it for anything except to go in and do different experiments to make sure it works well and everything. But he is in an official partnership with Boeing, working with NASA to do things like to build these and to also, see if we got a picture, build a moon base. He wants to make a base on the moon. That's one of the articles I had written about earlier. And I get to write about NASA, where I get to go to NASA facilities occasionally, and you can see these on my Facebook. But he's got representation in a lot of these. Every time you go to a NASA museum, they've got something similar to this, where they're demonstrating these habitats that they hope to work with Bigelow with to actually, look at just how huge, these are some more to-scale habitats in his in their building there. But yeah, they've got the aliens on the side of them. So there you go. So let's go look at a couple other things. So I'm just seeing if there's some questions there in the chat, but let's look at the last couple news stories here. This is in the Sentinel source, the Keene Sentinel in New Hampshire. I would now do a New Hampshire accent if I could, because it's very interesting accent they have, but I'm just not good at it, so I won't even try. But this is an interesting article. This is essentially a letter to the editor by this gentleman, Alan T. Ansevin. Alien life can be found close to home. So he's saying, last week you guys wrote about this project to go where NASA's going to go look for life. Well, it's right here. He's like, the Washington Post reported on Lou Elizondo. It was actually in New York Times who broke the story. But the Post also had a story that same day. Theirs wasn't as thorough. They didn't have access that the Times had. But he said, look, UFOs are real. The government's been looking into them. Astronauts Edgar Mitchell and Gordon Cooper have talked about them. And he makes this argument, J. Allen Hynek, who I mentioned earlier, was into it. He talks about NICAP and MUFON, other organizations who looked into it. So he's pretty much saying that, hey, UFOs are real. They're probably already here. We should spend the money and look closer to home. So yeah, I just thought this was kind of a cool article out there, a letter to the editor. Close some of this up. And do we have more? Yep, we got a couple more real quick here. The unexplained remains in Belleville, and for some, it's real. So this is the Wisconsin State Journal, and in Belleville, Wisconsin, and I was not even aware of this. I guess they have an annual event, and they've been having it since 1987, and it's coming up here soon again. In order to see these pictures, because there are some good ones here, apparently we're going to have to answer some questions in this survey. So let's do it. Which of the following fast food restaurants has the best tasting food? Wendy's, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, Sonic, Burger King. Don't eat at fast food, other fast food hamburger restaurants. I'm going to say best tasting food. Now, you guys may not know this, but I'm a vegetarian. Very little at Wendy's, but when I used to eat meat, I loved their fries the best. Jack in the Box, I've never been that big of a fan of. Also not that veggie friendly. McDonald's, I eat breakfast there quite a bit, and I do like it. Sonic is got good like desserts and stuff, I think. And Burger King has a veggie burger, which I do like. I'm going to choose. Let's see what you guys think. Unless someone's able to convince me, I'm going to choose Burger King. Harvey's, never heard of them, but nobody's convincing me. That's it. Burger King it is. Burger King. Okay, now we can get to the pictures. So this is really cool. This guy has a Camaro, and he took all this metal and built it around the Camaro, and so now his car is like this big UFO, and it's supposed to look like a UFO. It's a 1976 Chevrolet Camaro, and he did this in the 80s, I guess, and they have a parade at this event, so there's from the inside looking out, and he drives this car at the parade. Looks like the parade's going to be on October 27th, but here are some pictures of the first event. So here you have, it looks like a high school auditorium or something these guys meet in. There's a picture of their 1991 parade, but I like this picture here. There's Don Schmidt. I like this picture in particular because he's a friend of mine. I know him, and look at him in 1987, 30 years ago or so, looking much younger than I've ever seen him look. Oh, there he is more recently. I think he might even live out in that area. So, yeah, there's Don Schmidt. There's Martin in 1987. Me in 1987. Actually, this is 1991 when I graduated from high school. So, yeah, that's about the gist of that story, that Bellevue has this event that's been going on since 87. And our last story here is yet again another article about the History Channel's upcoming television show, Project Blue Book, which is going to be about Dr. J. Allen Hynek investigating UFOs with the Air Force. And as you can see here, apparently finding out about an alien that's held in something. So, I mean, this, as far as we know, never happened. In fact, Don Schmidt right here. Oh, here's more pictures. Cool. It's a cool one. It's the car. Oh, one more. Let's see. Ah, look at those little fellas. That's just adorable. Don Schmidt right here used to work with Dr. J. Allen Hynek. In fact, John Schmidt, and this is about more like the time. Don Schmidt, this is a great story. He worked for J. Allen Hynek's Center for UFO Research. He was one of his investigators. And Hynek, when Don Schmidt is best known for his research with Roswell. In fact, he is, I think, the president of the board for the Roswell Museum. He speaks out there in Roswell, has written many books about Roswell. However, this is a good story. He's told it on the podcast, and I've had him tell it before. When Hynek and those guys first heard about Roswell, they were highly skeptical. They thought it was ridiculous. In fact, finally, they told him, Don, go out there and research this for us. And he said, all right, I'm going to figure this out in a couple days. This is a joke. This is ridiculous. I'll go out there and do this for you, Mr. Hynek, sir. He goes out there and found that it was he believes, a much more mysterious event than he thought it was, and decades later, he's still looking into it. So, yeah, he actually used to work for Hynek, and this is Alan Gillen, who plays Littlefinger on Game of Thrones, who is playing Dr. J. Allen Hynek on a television show. But many of the cases that they're going to be looking into are real Blue Book cases that are very interesting. You can go to the History Channel and read about some of the real cases. Of course, they're going to be fictionalized on the show, and many of these cases Hynek wasn't involved with, but that's what's exciting about this. I think it's going to be bringing awareness to Dr. J. Allen Hynek and also to these great cases. And that's the gist of that one. So, oops, pushed the wrong button. Let's go back to the chat because our day is about over. There's a question about the Antarctic ice sounds. I did hear those sounds. I did not. I looked into it a little bit, but here's what I saw. Is that this isn't something new, apparently. At least I found other sites that had talked about sounds in the Antarctic from the past before. And there are the sounds of, it could be ice moving and stuff like that. So I don't know. They're really weird, though. So yeah, go Google that. It's not a UFO story, so I didn't have it in my links there. But recently they have this recording of these ice sounds that in the Antarctic, and the ice makes this really weird kind of humming noise. So it's really interesting. When does the TV show start? Somebody's asking. That Blue Book series. It starts in January. I'm going to confirm that, though. Let's look at our story here. What's interesting about this story, too, a lot of the news has come out about it, about this Project Blue Book show, because of New York Comic Con, which was last week. It was just a couple weekends ago. And there was a big, they did a lot of things, including having panels. And the people who made the show are really into UFOs. And they suspect that, what they're going to be portraying here, which was that, there's more going on than meets the eye behind the UFO investigations. They feel that is the case, that, what they're going to be kind of fictionalizing and showing here is more accurate to what really happened, that, there was essentially, and this is what's going to, J. Allen Hynek is going to be investigating UFOs, but he's going to find hints that there's something going on behind the scenes, that they're hiding stuff from him, and there's more going on, and that he may be just part of a front. Of course, that's what many people in the UFO field feel. That there was more going on, and that was just kind of a public relations affair. But to answer your question, January 8th will be the first episode. Who recorded the sounds? I'm not sure. You're going to have to Google that and find out. Oh, let's see. A little update from our friend who talked about what we thought may be David Jacobs. He says, from biology science, we know that any aliens briefing our air will be dead in the next 72 hours because of the multitude of pathogens scenario of the film The War of the Worlds. Well, while The War of the Worlds makes sense that could be the case, that was fictionalized. We don't know 72 hours is going to be it or something. But I would imagine, just like us, when we go to another planet, we wear spacesuits, so we're not affected. So I'd imagine if there was an extraterrestrial civilization coming here, they would be aware and they would wear spacesuits so they don't die from those pathogens. That would be my guess. But what do I think about the neutrinos projecting out of the Antarctica? I'm guessing that the neutrinos are a new rock band that I'm not aware of, and that from the Antarctic, or they're having a concert in the Antarctica. That's what I'm guessing. If I'm wrong about that, which admittedly likely I am, I'm not aware of what you're talking about. Dirk says neutrinos are a good question. Good question or a good band? And I think that is it. So thank you all so much for joining us once again. Of course, go to openminds.tv to find out more about all the cool stuff in UFO. And so you could either, and just kind of a guide here, articles, television shows, videos, you'll all see here. And then always check out the UFO headlines. And I want to tell you about a couple other things. If you want to look at the headlines, going back for ages, you can go to this daily UFO headlines, because we used to do them daily, now more weekly, but still we get the majority of them. You can go back and see, and these are almost all completely mainstream media. Space.com, the History Channel, the Coloradan, news.com.au, which is actually the biggest Australian news site, newjersey.com. So these are legit mainstream media writing about UFOs. And it's interesting because as time goes on, some people say, oh, UFOs aren't that big of a deal. People aren't paying attention as much. Look at this. There are tons and tons of mainstream articles on UFOs all of the time. It's never died down. It's still a very popular subject, which reminds me of AlienCon, which I'll be going to next month and be doing a few talks there. It's going to be in Baltimore, November 9th through 11th. AlienCon is in relations with Ancient Aliens. So essentially, if you watch Ancient Aliens, you'll see commercials for this. So, and Ancient Aliens is huge. So it's still a very, very big topic. I hear from production companies. I just heard from another one today because they call me all the time. They want to do a UFO show. They want to pick my brain, or sometimes even ask me if I want to be involved. I'm more hesitant these days of those organizations, but tons of people looking into doing that. You can see that these UFO Seriously Lives, these are articles based on sighting reports, but you can see all of that. But I want to show you, of course, here's the radio show. Here you can go to the video portal to see all of the UFO Congress videos. So, and in fact, as of recently, we have all the 2018 lectures up. So you can watch all of the lectures from the UFO Congress. Here's a great one. Robbie Graham, Don Schmidt, the guy I was just talking about. Lou Elizondo's in here. Really good stuff. D.L. Keller, aerospace engineer. Bryce Zabel, movie dude. He's a Hollywood guy. He writes movies. He was in charge of the Academy Awards for a few years. Worked for CNN. He's the creator of the television show Dark Skies, if you saw that, which is kind of like this Project Blue Book show that's coming up. Lots of really good stuff. In fact, here's Bryce and some of those others on a panel that we had. So here you could see for a few bucks, you could watch one video. You could get a 7-day free trial, or for a couple bucks more, you have access to all of these videos. So you could get there from here. But I also was getting at UFO resources. So we have all of the APRO bulletins. This was an early organization, the Rockefeller UFO briefing document. This was the Rockefellers. Lawrence Rockefeller. He passed away just a few years ago, but he is an heir to the Rockefeller. He helped start Silicon Valley. He also was into UFOs, and he had this document created. This is a copy of one of the originals. Geez, what's with all of these pictures of these girls in there trying to get the links? Maybe we should do that to get more clicks. But this is a copy of the one of the originals. We scanned the originals because Antonio Huneas, who helped write this book, in fact, you'll see him in the credits right at the top. He had a bunch of copies. In fact, I have one of the original copies, and he only got 1,000 printed to show his high-level friends, the Clintons. He spent a lot of time hanging out with the Clintons to talk UFOs. But you can download all of that at Open Minds as well. So we've got a lot of resource information. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of that on our page as well. And get your OpenMinds.tv shirts, people. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. The show is over. We'll talk to you next week. don't forget to check out the podcast, which we'll have up on Tuesday right here. We also put it up on YouTube, but you can see it at openminds.tv. And stay tuned for more stuff. We've always got new, exciting stuff coming up. And, of course, we're doing video interviews and things like that on a